Again. Hey, what's up? It's me, Awesome Ali.
And I'm Race, and welcome back to another amazing classic live on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure you comment, you like, you share this video, because on this Sunday Classic Live with a twist, we have the 18-year-old politician Kate O'Connor here with us today. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. How are you doing today, Kate?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it was a beautiful day on the island, so I'm good. Yeah.
Awesome, amazing. And which island is this, if we may ask?
Oh, Vancouver Island.
Oh, amazing. Yes.
So BC is in the house with us today.
Awesome. So, Kate, we're going to start off, as always, with who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm Kate O'Connor. I am a recent high school graduate, and the last thing I did was in the BC provincial election, I ran as the Green Party MLA candidate in Saanich South. So exciting times.
Oh my goodness. Amazing.
And did you happen to win that, or do you know yet?
Well, so we just finished counting the mail-in ballots, and the winner of the election in Saanich South was Lana Popham, who is the agricultural minister, the NDP candidate. But with a snap election, only 3.5 weeks to campaign, I was pretty happy with the result, and ended up getting, I think, 20% of the vote, which is kind of crazy to think about. So that's good. I feel good about that. Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, that's woo! 20% of the votes, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about, because we only had 3.5 weeks to campaign, but yeah, definitely.
And yeah, usually you need like a month or 6 weeks at least. That's absolutely
6 months
amazing.
probably.
Yeah, 6 months.
So do you think that there's starting to be a change in people's viewpoints on young people being in politics?
Yeah, so throughout the campaign, I had a lot of people talk to me about how they were concerned about having a young person in politics, but I think that the tide is definitely changing. This is an important time, I believe, now more than ever, for young people to stand up as we face the climate crisis, which is going to disproportionately affect young people. In the BC snap election, there were quite a few young candidates running, which was pretty exciting to see. The Greens ran 4 young candidates, but the NDP and Liberals ran young candidates as well. And I think it was super exciting to see that young candidates were being taken seriously. And, we're proving that young people deserve a place in politics. And throughout the campaign, I was talking about kind of this cycle where young people they're criticized and they're blamed for not being involved in politics. And then when they step in, they're told that they're too young, or that they're not serious. And so I was happy to run as a young candidate, in part to work at breaking the cycle of young people being seen as not being able to participate in politics.
That's a great answer there, because you're not only addressing their concerns, you're also, showing that you've taken the action to do so, right? It's just not like, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that, I'm doing it right now, which is absolutely amazing. So other than that, do you have any other reason to be into politics? Like, what kind of inspired you to get into it?
So I have been, always pretty politically aware, watch the news, super aware of climate strikes and social justice issues. And so I started volunteering for the Greens because I saw that they had the strongest climate action plan. And I also saw that the Green Party, and I truly believe that there can be no climate justice without social justice. And I think that that's really key to creating a better world and to helping solve our world problems. I started volunteering for the Greens. And then when the snap election was called, I decided that it was time to run, because the youngest MLA was 35 when government was dissolved. And so that is kind of shocking to me, that as crucial decisions are being made about the future of British Columbia, that no one under 35 had a voice, there was no youth perspective in the legislature at all. So, that's part of the reason why I decided to run.
Wow. Do you have something to say?
I was going to say 35. That's insane.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think that she was the youngest re-elected MLA in BC too. So, I truly believe that having diverse perspectives in terms of age, background, like perspectives, those are all so important. And the youth perspective is completely missing from the legislature at the moment.
And how do you think that could benefit having a youth perspective in the legislature?
So, I mean, it's not only about the environment. Young people are struggling with many crises in different ways, like, you know, the affordability crisis, which is disproportionately affecting students and young families, the overdose crisis. Like, these are all issues that young people have a slightly different perspective on. And to make the best decisions for as many people as possible, it's important that we have as many voices heard in the legislature.
And I think this all ties into another, a more broad question as well when we talk about politics and our political system, and that is democracy, having that voice, having that choice to stand up for yourself and actually being heard. So the bigger question here is, for you, Kate, is what does democracy mean to you? And in your opinion, where do you think the government has gone wrong?
Yeah, well, I think especially with the recent US election, kind of the idea of democracy and the importance of democracy and a strong, healthy, functioning democracy is on everybody's minds at the current minute. I think here in Canada we do have a pretty strong and thriving democracy, but I do believe that a vital part of democracy is having as many people as possible participate in politics. So one thing that my campaign did is that, you know, we recognize that young people and first-time voters, or like young people generally don't vote, and that's a huge problem. Why aren't they voting? And there's a kind of a disconnect between young people and participating in formal politics. But we need to have their votes. We need to know their perspectives. That's how you have a healthy, functioning democracy. So my campaign focused on youth engagement and trying, you know, focusing on getting first-time voters out to vote as well. So lowering the voting age is something we also talked about in the campaign, and how if you lower the voting age to 16, you can have voter education programming in schools so young people learn how to vote. And then it's been proven that the younger you are, you vote in your first election, the more likely you are to vote for life. So lowering the voting age would help increase voter turnout all around. But in terms of strengthening our democracy, one issue that I think we need to look into is proportional representation and switching from a first past the post system, because with a first past the post system, it's not the most effective way to have everyone's voices heard. So with New Zealand, we saw that they have proportional representation, and with a lower overall percentage of the vote, the Greens got more seats than they did here in Canada. So just thinking about our electoral process and how we can make it more fair and representative of how people are voting.
So there's not just a swinging majority of one side and everyone gets an equal share. So I have one question for you on the lowering the voting age. Do you think it's responsible to have a 16-year-old's vote because of how accessible political information is on social media
and the influence that
exactly
can cause? So what's your take on that?
I definitely believe in lowering the voting age. I mean, everyone is getting this information. Everyone can be biased this way, but 16-year-olds have certain responsibilities. They're old enough to have a job. They're old enough to understand a little more about the world, and that the decisions that are made are going to affect 16-year-olds. They're going to affect young people. They're going to affect the future. And by having voter education programming brought into schools, you can have young people be very educated about the candidates. You can learn about candidates in schools, and in some cases make more informed decisions than adults who don't take time to read platforms and learn about candidates. So many times on the campaign trail, I'd say to people, they'd ask me a question and I'd say, have you had a chance to look at the platform? All of this information is in the platform. And so by teaching young people in schools the importance of voting is something I strongly, strongly believe in.
Well, we do have a careers class in civics. Grade 10. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Ali. Civics and careers. So do you think your voter education program should be something separate, or should it be more focused on when teaching that civics course?
Or to kind of rephrase that, with the civics course, it touches upon that. Do you think there should be more detailed information going into that when election times come around, to how to dig into a platform, or when election times come around to have a separate thing, or people come in and talk about it to the students?
I think so. We have a program here in BC called CLC, Career Life Connections. And I think that, even if we don't lower the voting age, I think having voter education programming, regardless of what the voting age is, should be in schools. So in that class, I would say it would be great to integrate it in that class and honestly just teach young people the logistics of voting, like how to request a mail-in ballot. These are things that, young people should know, and it'll help them when voting time comes around. And I also think regardless of if you're in an election or not, it's important to stress to young people that they should look into platforms and be educated about candidates, and that information is out there and easy to find.
So if a young person was interested in getting into politics, what would you recommend them do to start to get into that field?
So I would say, first of all, educate yourself on the topics. So this is something that is pretty easy to do. Talk to people who have different perspectives than yourself. That is something that I also think is important, making sure you engage with and talk to people who don't see eye to eye with you on issues. So educating yourself on topics, getting involved in student politics at school, learning how to converse with someone and debate someone in a respectful way, and then volunteering for a nonprofit or volunteering for a political party of your choice. So doing some research, seeing what party aligns with your views. If you're in an election cycle, that's great. There always needs so many volunteers in an election cycle. So you can make phone calls. You can go door knock if, depending on what's happening with COVID. You can go door knock. There's many things you can do. And even not in election cycles, political parties need volunteers. It's really about reaching out and taking that first step. I started volunteering for the Greens 2 years ago, and it was just a simple email to the contact email on their website. And so I think for young people, it's about initiating that step and reaching out.
Wow, that's a great step. Just ask and you shall receive, right? I know so many times with Race and I, where we're trying to interview people, right? Or even like when we interviewed Jared Robbins, who was Tony Robinson's son, really big in the personal development world. It was just a simple DM from our sisters, like, "Hey, you want to do this with us?" So I think with today and all the accessible, all the tools that we have at our fingertips, just to be able to connect, and if something's of your interest, you can just, "Hey, can I help you out?" People will gladly take for help right now, especially. So one thing you did touch on that I want to expand upon is communicating with people, a really important part in politics, but also in your everyday life. Through your experience on the campaign trail and helping out the Green Party, what are some communication techniques that you've been able to use in your own experience that's helped you to see eye to eye with people, even if they have a different viewpoint on a topic?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that one of my actually favorite parts of campaigning was door knocking and talking to people who, didn't see eye to eye with me. I'd say, first of all, the most important part is going in with the intention of listening. So going in and truly listening to what they're saying, not just formulating your own words in your head and what you're going to say back, listening to them and hearing their point of view and trying to find out where they're coming from. Everyone has different life experiences, different things that have shaped them, and different reasons for believing in the things they believe in. And so I would say starting from that place of truly listening to people and then responding in a non-combative way. So I think that's one thing about politics that I don't like, is how combative it is. And really, we need to move forward collaboratively together. And that's one of the reasons why I'm such a fan of the minority government system, because it forces people to work together who don't necessarily have the same perspectives, and to think creatively and to think more deeply about the legislation and the policy that they're putting forward.
When debating with your other candidates and opponents, what was the most difficult thing to converse in your debates? Like certain topics or policies? How did you handle that?
I mean, I really enjoyed the debates. I thought it was a great opportunity. Because of COVID, we weren't able to really meet in person. So I was excited to have that opportunity. I would say it gets tough to debate topics when they're so personal to you. So it's so important to be passionate. I mean, I think that's just a basis to have passion and compassion in politics. But for me, the climate crisis is something that is so personal to me. And so I think making sure that I could make my points clearly even though I do have so much emotion surrounding that topic specifically. But also when you're talking about really serious issues like the overdose crisis, I mean, that's something that you don't necessarily just want to debate about. Like, you're trying to come to a real solution to help real people. And I think that's something that's important to remember.
Oh, I like how you said that, like on those certain topics personal to your heart, like the overdose crisis. We tend to get wrapped up in the topic so much that I've seen that people tend to forget that this actually goes on, right? Like for example, the climate problems that we're experiencing right now, and the climate change. You know, there's a lot of people who just like to talk about it, you know, say this, say that, but then for me personally, like I can hear all the information, great, but I don't think more information is what's needed at this moment. It's more of like taking that actionable step and then like following along, getting people to follow you as you take those first steps, as you take the first initiative to start something new. I think that's what's more important rather than just like letting out more information, because information, we don't really need it. A lot of people know that you're supposed to eat healthy. You know, you're supposed to have a more balanced diet of vegetables and less meat and stuff, right? But you don't change. It's about taking the first action step.
I also think talking to people from a place, like explaining where you're coming from. So one thing that especially worked with, or really just tried to convey the point about how concerned so many young people are about the climate crisis, is when I told older constituents, like, my generation is worried that we won't be able to have children because it won't be ethical. And I think that explaining that I have this fear, this is a real fear that many people in our generation face, you know, kind of appealing to the emotions as well to people is also important for people to kind of understand where you're coming from.
And as we're talking about these personal topics, so you focus on climate change, and another one is the Indigenous communities in your area. So what is something that people tend to misunderstand when it comes to the Indigenous communities as a whole?
So one of the reasons why I chose to run with the Greens was because I was so shocked and horrified by how Indigenous people were being treated in BC by the current government. So I would say one thing that I talk about and I advocate for is following Indigenous leadership. So it's not about, you know, it's about following Indigenous leadership and making sure that Indigenous leaders have a place, and we're allowing them to speak and we're amplifying their voices. We're not just taking over. And I'd say that's something that's very important that we talked about on the campaign trail. So I advocating for Indigenous self-determination, advocating for more Indigenous-led conservation. So kind of things like that.
What does Indigenous leadership look like to you? Like, how does that work with the current system right now?
Well, I mean, I think the current system is very, very broken. And I think recognizing that is part of the problem. I mean, it's part of the solution, recognizing that the system as a whole is so broken. And so I did talk about that on the campaign trail, and also recognizing that climate justice and social justice are so intertwined, and you can't achieve one without achieving the other. So, for example, pushing for Indigenous-led conservation, I think, is super important, and that includes having, you know, Indigenous education programming in schools as well. There's an interesting statistic that 5% of the global population is Indigenous, yet land that they steward or manage is home to 80% of global biodiversity. So that's a crazy statistic, and that's something that I said that people, you know, it spoke to them, and they understood that.
Thank you. That's actually very interesting that you put it that way, because I think when we come to recognize these kind of issues and bring awareness to it, it's not just the idea, but it's the actual vision and the mapping of what we want it to look like and why it should be like this, having that kind of meaning. So we're going to move away from the politics. These are absolutely amazing answers, and you're absolutely amazing. The next question is what purchase under $100 or less has positively impacted your life in the last 6 months or in a recent memory?
That is a very good question. One of my favorite hobbies is reading. So I would say the purchase of books. Many books are under $100. All my books actually are under $100. So I'd say that definitely is something that's positively impacted my life. I'm currently reading To the Lighthouse, which is pretty good. And then as I was saying earlier, that actually the book here, The Over Story, which I also recommend, which we're handing out as a volunteer gift on our campaign, about trees and how it's a story about trees and how family heritage kind of is passed down through trees. So it's a very interesting book. I recommend. But I would definitely say books in general. I'm also a fan of murder mysteries.
Oh, interesting.
What's your favorite murder mystery novel?
So I like Agatha Christie, the British murder mystery novelist. So I like I don't know. All of those mystery books are pretty good. Kind of the traditional, like they're all in the manor house. What happens? Yeah.
Who's gonna get killed next?
Yeah, and then There Were None, I believe, was a big one by her.
A very famous one. Now all of her books are turning into movies.
Yeah,
Murder on the Orient Express too.
So our next question is, if you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere, it doesn't have to be in BC, it could be in Hollywood, it could be right in front of Washington, D.C. or Ottawa. If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere in the world with anything on it, what would it say? Where would it be? What would it say and why?
So I would say probably before the U.S. election, I would have put it in a swing state, and I would have put vote Biden in big letters. Now I think I would say something about the climate crisis, and I think I would want it probably in Ottawa, in a very visible place. And I think I would want it to say something about how, our generation, a lot of us are scared to have children, because I think that's a huge, like when we're older, we think that it's not going to be ethical to have them and pass down this broken planet to them. So I think that that's something that is quite shocking to a lot of older people who've never thought about it that way. And I think that could be important to have, and maybe would help impact people's actions, individual actions in a positive way.
I go actually a question to go along the lines of it's not about conveying a message from young people about climate change to the older population. Right now, there tends to be a stereotype around young people that like, oh yeah, you guys are activists on all these topics all of a sudden, but you don't have necessarily the background knowledge or like the experience. You don't really understand what's going on. I think people tend to underestimate how knowledgeable and how much action young people can take. So in that context of, trying to get people to understand and listen, how would you convey that message, or how are you conveying the message of climate change right now to those quote unquote sticklers?
Well, I would say that the young people, especially like Greta Thunberg, like many people here who have had massive climate strikes, have shown the power of young people. But I would say when people told me that I didn't have enough formal experience, I would say to them that, I have a different life experience, and young people today have a different life experience than every single other person currently sitting in the BC legislature, because we have the experience of what it's like to grow up during a climate crisis, to live with all this climate anxiety. And so that's the message that I believe in, and that I was telling older voters when I was told that I don't have as much formal experience.
Yeah, I think one thing that we tend to overlook is that when we were younger, they were celebrating the age of discovery, discovering the planet, discovering the beauty of nature. And, we're kind of living in the age of extinction and watching the beauty of the planet go extinct, right? It's very drastic, it's harsh, it's dramatic, but those are the reality.
Yeah, from like the 60s, all the revolutions and stuff. And then now it's like, okay, back in the 60s, they thought you could dump whatever in the oceans, it could be fine. But now, hey, what's this washing up upon shore?
Yeah. Anyways, so these issues and being in politics can sometimes be very overwhelming. How do you deal with that sense of being overwhelming or unfocused? Like, what are your tips? What do you do? Give it to us.
I like to go running. So I'm lucky to live near the ocean, and so I like to go running along the ocean, or walking with my family. I'd say that is definitely the number one thing that I like to do. Being outside can kind of give you perspective and just kind of refocus and recenter you. But before I did do any big debates or any big interviews, I always take about 2 minutes to just kind of center myself and clear my mind, not think of anything, and just breathe. And I think that might sound very simple, but there's a huge difference between doing that and not doing that.
Mm-hmm. I like that, because whenever I hear meditation, I'm like, okay, I can do it, but I won't do it, but I can't do it, and then keep going for that. Yeah. So this has been absolutely amazing. Ali, want to kick it off with our conclusion, our last question.
Yes. So, Kate, thank you for being on our show. Thank you for being on our Sunday Classic Live, really close to OGs for Race and I. What are some last inspiring words that you'd like to tell to the young generation of tomorrow and to our reviewers right now?
I would say, especially to young people, but to everyone, we are at a crucial moment in history as we face many crises: the climate crisis, the affordability crisis, as we face human rights violations with Indigenous rights, particularly in Canada. We are at a huge crossroads in history, and it's important that we get involved, especially for young people to get involved. And that doesn't need to be running for office. That can simply mean voting. That can simply mean talking to people about your perspective, trying to talk to your parents about the climate crisis and what you're concerned about. And so I would say, do whatever you can to get involved in any capacity, even if that just means educating yourself on the issues, because this is not a time when you can't do anything. This is not a time to sit back if we want a future, frankly.
Wow. Nice. Great way to end off today. This was presented by APSO. Awesome people
shaping our world.
Remember, you are awesome,
and you can make the world a better place. Bye. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you for having me.